a spark arrestor.
We can get a flat file.
This is more of your kind of performance race car.
This little needle bearing,
It's a bit of a trick to putting this back on.
away all the time. Tell you what, the Americans do good leather.
Okay, let's look at parts of a chainsaw. So, get that husky out of the way. Let's go over this chainsaw. This is a nice new STIHL MS261C. It's a great saw. What we have is the front handle or wraparound handle. This is the chain brake front handguard. To remove the chain brake, what we want to do is keep one thumb under the wraparound handle, use all of your fingers and pull it up. To engage the chain brake, back of the wrist. Side cover. This is your chain catcher. It's a softer alloy metal. It's replaceable. It will get damaged. It will get bent. This is your guide bar or bar. This is your chain. Moving around the saw, we've got the dogs or felling dogs. In the front here, we have an exhaust or muffler. Inside the exhaust or muffler is something that's very similar. I'll actually pull it out. Inside here is something called a spark arrestor. It does get clogged up if you run your saws too rich with oil. It also gets clogged up if you don't clean them regularly. You take this out, get a blowtorch, clean it, or you get some degreaser or brake cleaner and steel brush and clean it, and then put it back in. So that is your spark arrestor. Moving around the saw, we've got your oil reservoir. Inside there is where you put your bar oil. Bar oil's close to the bar, the fuel's away from the heat. Underneath here we've got springs. There's a couple of springs on the saw, there's another one in there, and a couple in here of rubbers. Essentially they are anti-vibe mounts or anti-vibe dampers, and it separates the two handles from the power head and the bar. As you can see, the handles are separate. So moving around the saw some more. Underneath here, there's a little picture of an oil drop and a chain and an E. It's the oil flow regulator. So you can get a small chainsaw spanner in there, small screwdriver, and you can adjust how much oil is being applied to the chain and bar. I open them all right up, more oil the better, in my opinion. Okay, moving around the saw some more. We've got the ripcord, pull cord, got the top cover, got the decomp button. This alleviates that first pull. So it's really easy to pull out. Whereas if we pop it back up, it's hard. It's also a good way to check the compression on a chainsaw. This is a brand new saw and it's holding compression really well. So that's your decomp button. Moving around to this side, we've got the fuel reservoir. Inside a fuel reservoir, there is a filter. The older filters you could take and clean out with an air compressor or something. These ones, you want to get some pliers, it's pretty tedious getting them out. You just replace them. Replace them from time to time, depending on your operator's manual. At the back here, we've got start, stop, choke combination. This is a newer saw, so it's essentially got hot start and cold start. Cold start's down the bottom, pull the trigger, it's in hot start, and then it's off. Really simple, really easy to manage. At the back here, we have your rear hand handle and your rear hand guard. This is to protect your hand from the ground, as well as chains flying off. We've got a trigger and a interlock or throttle trigger lockout. So it avoids the trigger being depressed if there's a stick hitting it or something like that. So they're all the main parts of the exterior of the chainsaw. So these are retaining nuts, so they won't come all the way out. Take the side cover off. In the bush, you just clean it out a bit. This is the important part to make sure it's clean, is the contact area here where you clamp it up against the bar. You don't want any debris or anything in there. This is a rim sprocket, so it slightly moves on the clutch drum. This is part of the chain brake band that goes around and puts a brake on the clutch drum. This part here is the chain catcher. So when the chain flies off, for some reason, whatever, they do fly off, this is designed to catch the chain. It is a softer metal, like an alloy, so it does wear over time. It also gets banged, and bent in, so you can easily just undo a screw there and replace it if it needs replacing. The chain tensioner knob. So on the bar, we've got 2 holes and another little one there. So the little one there is the chain oiler, which will make a little bit more sense a little bit later on. But this is the chain tensioner. So essentially, to tension the chain, we'll turn this screw here with our chainsaw spanner, and that knob will move back in and moves the whole bar back in, and you can see how loose it's gotten there. And to tension it up, we'll tighten this and it will move that chain tensioning knob out, thus pushing the bar out, and tension the chain. So now it's really tight. I'll just back it off a little bit. Now we can take this chain and bar off. So to do that, we can just basically pull it off. Take it off the rim sprocket. Take the chain off. Parts of the chain, we've got the tooth, the depth gauge. Some old boys will call it a raker, saying that it rakes out the kerf or the cut, but it's the depth gauge, call it what you will. Underneath here we've got the tangs, and we've got the drive links as well. So they're all parts of the chain. There's rivets and other important information about this, but we'll try and keep it a bit simple, just to learn the basics. So this chain is a STIHL chain. This fits on a STIHL bar. You can't mix and match Husky and STIHL because they're slightly different. For example, the Husky chain will be a little bit thinner in the tangs, and the STIHL will be a little bit fatter. Okay, chain, the bar and the sprocket all match, so it's all 325 pitch. So these, if you are going to increase the gauge or the pitch of the chain, you really need to change the bar and the sprocket. Okay, some of the mix and match I understand, but as a general rule, you replace the bar, the chain and the sprocket together. So we'll put that chain aside for now and we'll just look at the bar. Different parts of the bar, we've got the holes here for chain tensioning, bar tensioning. We've got oil flow holes on this side and that side. Other parts of the bar is we've got all the information written here on the bar. So this will tell us what file we need to use, what chain we need for it. So it's a 40 centimeter or 16-inch bar. It has 67 drive links. It has a 1.6 millimeter or 0.063 gauge chain, and it is a 0.325, that's the pitch. 0.325 tells us that we need to use a 3/16 file. It does have a sprocket on the end of the bar. We need to be careful when we're cleaning out the rails with our tools not to scrape into there. We want to scrape away all the time, okay? Always scrape away and clean the rails out. You can get an air compressor in there and clean it out, or something else, a bit of wire or something. You need to make sure that the oil flow holes are very clear. If they're blocked up, then no oil can get to the chain. Do it both sides, make sure it's completely clean, because you might put it on this way or you might put it on that way. You are meant to rotate the bar every time you change the chain. Every time you take the chain off, you're meant to flip the bar over. But I find if you just don't think about it and put it down, odds say that it will rotate itself. Okay? So next thing we have to do is we have to dress the bar. What I mean by that is we need to check for sharp edges, okay? This one's actually quite fine because it's brand new. Okay, so let's look at the bar and the rails. So this is an exaggerated version looking straight down the bar. These are the rails where the tangs of the chain will slot in and slide along. So we're looking at this here. What we're looking at is these edges here. When it's brand new, it'll look like that. When they get a bit worn or you're running your chain a little bit too loose, they will get spikes on them like this, or burrs. And you'll get these very sharp edges. If you let them get too long, then they'll spread out, and when you're cutting wood, it'll cut down and it'll grab the wood as you're cutting. So what we want to do is get rid of these. There's a couple of ways you can do it. We can get a flat file on the angle and file it off. You can get on a linisher or a sander or something on your bench and do it. You can buy a particular tool that runs along like a snowboard edger, and it will clean that off really easily. So I'm going to show you just the basic flat file method. And what we want to do is we want to bring it back to normal. This is called dressing the bar. So we want to file off these corners, and it leaves a little kind of edge like that. And that'll give you a little bit more time before you need to do it again. Okay, how I like to do this is down on my boot or on the ground without getting mud in there. So I have seen a lot of people do it like this. They run their file flat, like that. I find it just takes all the paint off your bar and clogs up your file. There are some bars that are slightly concave, but we won't even worry about all that. We'll just talk about the very basics. I just want to get a flat file and get the angle on the 45. I also want to get this angle on the 45. And what I'll do is I'll put it on my nice American leather boots. I'll tell you what, the Americans do good leather. So I want 45 and 45, and I'm going to push the file down until I get up to the end. I don't want to focus too much on one area. Okay, then you go to the other side, you do that, and you flip it over and do the other two sides. So I'm not doing it too much, really. If I had to do it properly, I would be really pushing hard, and you've got to put some effort into it and feel it. It will be worse this point, and here, because it's where the chain goes around, say, the sprocket and slaps back into the bar. And it will be worse here, and you'll dig out your bar if you always run your chains too loose or you're too aggressive. So I run my chains quite tight because they're designed for it. If you run them too loose, you will burr out a lot of this, okay? So that is the bar and chain. Now let's have a look at the actual chainsaw. Okay, what we want to do with this area in here is, if you're out in the bush, you just clear it out. Don't worry too much about cleaning it up. This is the oil flow outlet. This is where the oil comes from, and it comes in underneath this clutch drum here, and there's a little worm drive that whenever this is spinning, it's pumping oil and it comes out of the oil flow outlet. The oil flow outlet has a hole at this end and is a long slot. So that's designed to always contact the oil hole on the bar, no matter how tight or loose the bar is. You must make sure nothing gets in here. This is imperative that you keep clean. If something gets in there, get it out. This is your chain tensioning knob, and underneath here is your brake band and your clutch. So what I might do is I might pull it completely apart just to show you what's under there and how it works. This is not something you need to do for a daily maintenance though. So for starters, I'll take this off using my Torx L wrench. And this is now your tool holder. Put them all in your side cover. Nice and clean this. So you could take that off if it was dirty, just give it a bit of a wipe, put it down. This is your chain tensioner. Don't be afraid to replace them. So you can get in here and pull this out yourself. And it costs you, I don't know, in Australia, I think there's it's like a 3-part item, but I mean, you can pull this out and that's it. It's worth about, I think it's around $50 all up, comes in a few different parts, and you can put it back in. So this is something that will probably break over the life of a chainsaw, and you can see how easy it is to take out. Last I heard, someone took one in to get replaced. It cost them about $150 in Australia, so I would advise you do that yourself because it's a 5-minute job and you can do it yourself. It will happen, you will break the chain tensioner more often if you are using the chainsaw too aggressively and you're revving it high and slapping the bar on the wood, or you are slamming your chain brake on when the chain's still spinning. So, what else we have under here? What I'll do is I'll take this cover off. Again, this is not something you have to do, but I just want to show you how the chainsaw actually works under here. You want to take this off and give it a clean out. So there's our plastic cover. In here you can see the chain brake mechanism, and the chain brake band goes around the outside of the clutch drum, and it simply grabs tight around it, so it can't spin, but now it can. Okay, so what we'll do, and I like to say that there are fancy tools for all of this stuff, but I try and keep it as simple as I can using just like a chainsaw spanner, because it's stuff you can do on the truck or out in the field. So this is a little E-clip we want to remove. Watch your eyes, keep a couple of these, because when you put them back on, they do go flying. So keep a couple of spares, and they do flog out over a bit of time, so they don't quite hold as well the more times you take them off. This is a little retaining washer, and this is our rim sprocket. So our rim sprocket, you can see it's a STIHL, and it's got 0.325, well, it's got 325-7. The 7 is how many positions there are for the tangs to go in. So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can change this. You can get a 325, I'm not sure, because I've honestly never changed them. I'm a bit of a stock guy. I like to keep things just stock and look after them. So I'm pretty sure you can get like a 325 8 or 9 or a 6 or a 5 or something. So you can change the torque of the chainsaw or the speed of the chainsaw, okay? This is a rim sprocket. And a rim sprocket just goes on there, and it has some slight movement, okay? It helps with the wear. Where it will wear is in these parts in here. We have the clutch drum, okay? This is where the inside here is where the clutch pads contact and spin the chain. There's a little cutout, a little notch here for the worm drive to run the oiler. Put that aside. So in here we have this little needle bearing. This little needle bearing, from time to time, check your manual how often, but I'd say if it's worked hard all week, I would put grease on this once a week. And you get your bearing grease and you put a little bit on it. I don't need to with this because it's brand new. Put a little bit of bearing grease, don't overdo it, and then you put it back on. But I'll set that aside for now. We'll just have a look in here. So in here we have a brake band. We have the chain brake mechanism, and we can see when it's idling, this is spinning. Okay, it's just not contacting the inside of the clutch drum because it's held together by 3 clutch springs. I'll try and get you a bit closer for that. It's got 3 clutch springs and 3 clutch pads, or weights. They're heavy weights, so they're held in tight. So when it's spinning, it's staying in tight. As soon as you apply the throttle, the centrifugal force will stretch those springs and throw those weights out, and they will contact the inside of this drum and they'll spin it. So right now they're not even touching it. Okay? So you need to make very sure if your chain brake is on and that clutch drum can't spin, you should never be revving it because you're wearing out the inside of your clutch drum. And if you have an older saw and you have a half choke, as soon as you start it on the half choke, you should take it to idle because a half choke will eventually smoke and then go pop and it'll blow this. Okay, so let's take the chain brake band off. So this is your chain brake band. It's something you can easily do yourself. So this is a little notch cut out of the clutch drum, and there's a little bit of metal in here, a little arm that slots into it. So you got to make sure when you're putting this back on, put the needle bearing back on, you want to spin it around until it, if it doesn't line up, then you've got to find the actual arm. Sometimes it just slots in, so it's over there. I'll try and line it up and push it down on. There we go, so it's clicked in now. Got the needle bearing in, and we'll put it all back together. Okay, we'll make sure the words are on the outside. We will put the retaining clip on and the E-clip. It is best to do with a pair of pliers. Or there's probably another tool that I don't know about. So you put the pliers on here and you can squeeze it in. However, there is a way to do it if you don't have pliers and you've just got a chainsaw spanner. You can either lever it on off the post here and lever this side up and this side pushes down, which is a good way to do it. This is a way I've always been taught, which is probably the most dodgy way, but it goes on. So there are better ways to do this, I know, but I'm talking about if you are in the field or in the bush, you don't have any other tools, so you can put that there and just bang it on. There we go. Okay, so now that's all back together, we can put this all back together. So that's all back together. Now we're going to put the chain and bar back on. And to put this on, you don't try and push them in like that. You just hold it in the bottom, pull tight, get it lined up, and just give it a bit of a wiggle, and it goes on. I can pull tight, move it around the chain sprocket, and it should just sit in over the chain tensioner. And I can see the sharp bit of the tooth is pointing out at the top. So that's put on correctly. So now we can put this on, tighten them up as tight as you can by hand. Okay, so it's not super tight, but it's pretty tight by hand. Now we need to look at the chain tensioning. How tight should the chain be? Okay, the bar will still move up and down until we tighten these nuts. You can never tension the bar, tension the chain with these nuts tight, because the bar needs to slide out and in. Okay, what is too loose? I'll show you what too loose is. Always use a tool to spin it. Never use your hand, and always spin away from the chainsaw. So this is too loose. You can see down here, it's not touching the bottom. That's obviously too loose. Now we'll do it a bit tighter. Tighten the chain. So now that's at least not visibly loose. Now, hopefully I don't break the chain tensioner, but I'll do it too tight, and I'll show you what too tight is. I've never broken one yet, but they will break if you do them too tight. So too tight is, it's too hard to spin. So they're two indicators that it's too tight or too loose, okay? So let's loosen it off a bit. Okay, whenever you're loosening and tensioning, always give it a bit of a spin. So that's a little bit loose. I'm gonna tighten it up just a little bit more. Okay, so before I tighten the nuts up, I'm just gonna check it. Oh, so that's a bit too tight. Loosen it off a bit. Okay, so what I've got here is a pretty tight chain. I'm going to hold the bar up when I tension these nuts, and they're holding tight enough now so I can let go of the bar. If you don't hold the bar up when you tension the nuts, when you first start to cut, the bar will move up and it will loosen your chain. Okay, so now let's look at this. So it spins. It doesn't run very much. It is very tight, okay? The reason for this, lots of people will give you different ideas on how to, if you can put a chainsaw spanner on and it sits up and doesn't fall down, that's how tight it should be. People say if you can see one bottom of the tang, if you lift it up, it's all good. But this is all feel and sight, okay? My opinion is Get a new chain, feel how tight it is. Once it's been serviced, feel how tight it is. Find someone more experienced and feel how tight it is, okay? And get a feel for it, because every bar has a different length and they'll need to feel a bit different in the middle, okay? So get your eye in. Now I understand this is spinning freely, but it's not running super loose. The reason for this is the brand new chain, they always stretch quite a bit. And particularly this one is cold and new, so as soon as I start cutting, it will loosen up a bit. So I'll leave it like this. On the scale of too tight to too loose, this chain is right up here to be too tight. However, when I start cutting with this brand new chain and it's cold and it warms up, it will probably loosen off to about just right, okay? So that's bar and chain. Now we'll have a look at the top of the chainsaw. We're gonna have a look in here. Okay, we might even take it apart a little bit further just so you can see what's inside here and how it works. Okay, so I've undone all of these screws. This is now my tool holder, my bits holder. Okay, so this is your ripcord, pull cord. Very easy to replace this cord. As you can see, it's just a cord that goes in and there's a little knot tied here. So you can cut the cord, feed it through the little hole on the side here and tie a knot in and pull it back through. Okay, so always carry a spare pull cord. So inside the chainsaw here, we've got a couple of things. Okay, it's good to clean this every now and then, just a bit of, brake cleaner or something. This is always spinning when the engine's running, okay? Okay, so this is always spinning, and this is designed like this to be a fan. And it blows air up and it cools the piston and cylinder assembly, or the block. So this has cooling fins all over it, okay? There's a lot of surface area to cool it down. There's no radiator water to keep it cool. The air blows up and cools this down. That's how it's designed to work. So these saws are meant to be run at full throttle. If you run a bigger saw at half throttle for too long, it'll cook the engine and it'll blow. So it's not good. So keep all of this clear of debris and clean. Okay, on top of here, we've got a little button here. This is the decomp button or compression button. All this does is when you push it in, it opens up the piston chamber inside and it makes it easier to do that first pull. We've got a spark plug and we've got an air filter. Most of these saws, most of these commercial saws will have a little part in here, and you can see it's got a little snowflake or a sun. So what that does is if I put it in this way, all the air stays in here. If I flip it around the other way, all of the hot air gets redirected back into the intake and it helps run in like snowy conditions. So we'll put it back in here. We're in Australia, so we'll keep it on the sun. Okay, the air filter. Whenever taking air filters off, put the full choke on, okay? This is brand new, so it doesn't need to be cleaned. You don't want anything to fall in here. So as soon as you take this off, you clean this and put it back. How do you clean an air filter? These particular air filters are paper type. So what we used to do back in the day is you used to get 2-stroke and then rinse it out in 2-stroke and shake it out. You're not meant to do that with these. And you're not meant to get an air compressor on these, or any filter for that matter. People say blow from the inside out with the air compressor, but that air compressor is really close to all the fibers in here and it's doing damage to the microscopic fibers. You should never use an air compressor close to any filter, okay? You pull back and you can blow from back here. Don't let anything get inside. To clean these in the bush, what you do is you just tap it out, okay? You just tap out all the bulk and put it back on. To clean these correctly, you want to get some like degreaser type stuff. They sell particular stuff at the stores. I don't use it because it's too expensive. What I use is CT18, this truck cleaner, and you can clean this with warm soapy water, whatever you want, and then put your degreaser on it, let it sit for a while, and then go clean it again and then let it dry. Okay, that's how you clean them, and you do it from time to time. You don't do it all the time. If you keep putting 2-stroke on there,
or using an air compressor, you'll reduce the longevity of your piston and cylinder. So, okay, spark plug. We won't even talk about the spark plug in here. They've got a single-use washer on them, so realistically, if you take it out, you're meant to put a new one in anyway. They're quite cheap. If you have trouble with them, I've played around with them before, you just replace the spark plug. That's usually one of the last things you do when you're maintaining the saw, if you can't find the problem and you're troubleshooting. So what we'll do is we'll put all this back together now and do the next thing. So I'll put the side cover back on, the ripcord back on, and we'll put the top cover back on now. You should never have to force these. It should just sit on and give it a click. Okay, and that's back, ready to go. Okay.
So let's pull the Husky apart, and we'll see some slight differences here. Chain brake must be removed. Chain brake must be removed before you take the side cover off. This Husky is set up slightly differently to the STIHL. So you can see the side cover is different from the STIHL. The STIHL has nothing in it. The Husky has the chain brake band in the side cover. Also, the chain tensioner is in the side cover. So there's a lot more going on here. If I was to leave the chain brake engaged, I wouldn't be able to pull the side cover off because the brake band would be tight around here. If I could get it off, then I wouldn't be able to get it back on. And it's a bit of a trick to putting this back on. Basically what you do is you've got to put it on the ground, dodge it on, apply a lot of pressure, maybe a knee to this, and release it. It's not good for the side cover, but it does work. If you've got any other tricks, then by all means tell me. How to clean this in the bush. If there's a lot in it, clean it off. This is not too bad. I'm just going to make sure this contact area is cleared, same as the STIHL. So you can see here, it's set up slightly differently. The clutch is inverted, it's on the outside. So we'll go through a very similar way of doing just daily maintenance on this. I'm going to push the bar back in, however, close to the clutch drum and the sprocket. I'm going to take the chain off and take the bar off. So if we look in here, we can see it's got an oil flow outlet. There's a little bit in there, not too much. It's got these posts here that hold on the bar. The bar is very much the same. However, this is the clutch drum. So this has two springs shaped like a C, not like the springs in a STIHL, and two clutch pads. Inside here is the sprocket. Slightly harder to get off. If you do want to do maintenance on this saw, you're going to need a piston stop to take the piston out, put a piston stop in, so when the piston comes up, it hits the piston stop and this doesn't turn, and you can undo it. I'll go through that in a further, more detailed video, but that's how you need to take this off. You can put a chainsaw spanner in here and hit it with a hammer and it will undo, but at the moment I can't because it just spins and spins and spins. There are other tips and tricks that we'll get to, but really, if you've got to change a sprocket on these and you don't know what you're doing, wait for a video from us or take it to a service department. Okay, so how to put this one back together. Unlike the STIHL, which is easier to do up like this, also before you put it back together, make sure this contact area is nice and clear. This one's easier to do up here, okay? I'm going to put the bar on. I'm going to push the bar right up against the sprocket. I'm going to get my chain with the sharp part of the teeth facing out. I'm going to put it over the sprocket, making sure the tangs are actually sitting in the sprocket and not beside the sprocket. And I'm going to put the chain over the tip of the bar. Now, when I've got the sprocket and the tip aligned, I can pull the bar out and rest the chain in the right position. Pull it out and we're good to go. There's a bit of stuff in here. Get out of there, you bugger. I didn't actually service this saw completely. I should have cleaned it out a bit more, but it's a training saw. And students will clean it out anyway. So I'm not bothering too much. I just wanted to show you the difference in clutch in there. So to put this side cover on, it doesn't quite go on because the chain tensioner knob won't fit in that hole, because I would need to pull that bar out really tight for it to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back this off. 1, 2, 3, and now I can put it on. That should fit in well. I can put my nuts back on. I'm not going to do this one as tight as the STIHL because it is an older chain and it won't stretch as much as a brand new chain. Okay, so how tight is this? I can spin it quite easily. So this is more what it would be like out of the factory. I can lift it, if I really try, I can lift it up pretty high, but it's reasonably high. So on a scale of too tight, too loose, it's probably somewhere in the middle, which means when it gets warm, it might even get a bit looser. So you need to check it after you start cutting. So apart from that, we've got the air filter. So I'm just going to pull this off quickly and show you that it is very much the same in here. Cooling fan in here, cooling fins, engine block, spark plug, air filter, slightly different, but it needs to be cleaned the same way. And that's about it. We make sure it's all clean. We've got this Husky 550 STIHL 26. It's actually an MS261C and it's a 550 XP Auto Tune Mark II. What's the difference? They're both very similar. I like using both of them. This is how I'd think of it. This is more of your kind of performance race car. This is kind of your trusty Land Cruiser 80 series, okay? I would buy for myself either one of those, whichever one was cheaper, to be honest. I like the idea of the longevity and the robustness of the STIHL, but I like the idea of the speed and the weight and the anti-vibe of the Huskies. So traditionally, generally, but in the past, they're all very different these days. The technology is changing rapidly and it's hard to keep up. But traditionally in the past, Huskies were known to be a higher performance, faster spinning, higher revving, lighter saw. They've got a slightly thinner bar, thinner tang, thinner chain, slightly more lightweight, and I'm reluctant to say the word inferior, but the piston and cylinder assembly is not as robust as the STIHL, whatever it's made out of. So this is really a high performance, slightly harder to do maintenance on if you've come from STIHL saws, like a performance vehicle. This is like your tractor, your 80 series Land Cruiser. It'll go, you can hand it to workers, they're gonna break it less than they would break a Husky. It's easier to maintain for the simpleton like me, and I really like it. So each to their own. I don't lean either way, to be honest. I respect their differences and I like them. So, second thing, what is a fuel ratio for a Husky and what is a fuel ratio for a STIHL? As per the manufacturer of Husky and STIHL, they are both 50-to-1 fuel ratio.